The small community center in a quiet southern town was alive with the sounds of folding chairs scraping against the polished wood floor and murmured conversations. Usually a place for neighborhood potlucks or book clubs, tonight the hall had transformed into a venue for something far more significant. At the front of the room stood Mayor Alexander Crane, a man known for his steady leadership and charismatic presence. But tonight, his confident demeanor was tinged with an unusual gravity, as though he carried a weight invisible to others. The audience was a mix of young families, retirees, and curious locals eager to hear the mayor speak. Among them sat 8-year-old Lily, her petite frame almost swallowed by her chair. She clutched a weathered leather-bound Bible close to her chest, the faint gold lettering on its cover barely legible. It was her grandmother's, a treasured keepsake filled with pressed flowers and handwritten notes in the margins. Her mother leaned down before the event began, whispering softly, "If you're brave enough to ask, Lily, make sure you ask from your heart." Lily nodded, her small hands trembling. For weeks, she had practiced her question, murmuring it under her breath during bedtime prayers and writing it over and over in her notebook. It wasn't a question born of simple curiosity. It was one that weighed on her soul. As the mayor spoke, his words echoed through the room. Updates on local initiatives, anecdotes about the town's history, and optimistic visions for the future. The crowd clapped politely, but the energy was subdued. Lily waited, her fingers tightening around the edges of her Bible as she rehearsed her questions silently, her heart racing. Finally, the floor opened for questions. A line quickly formed as adults stepped forward to discuss local infrastructure, education policies, and even a light-hearted comment about the mayor's signature blue tie. Lily hesitated, shrinking into her seat. But when her mother gave her a gentle nudge, she knew it was time. Her legs felt like jelly as she stood, and the room seemed impossibly vast. The line felt endless. But as Lily edged closer to the microphone, the murmurs in the room began to quiet. People turned their heads, noticing the small girl with the oversized Bible clutched to her chest. When her turn came, Mayor Crane smiled kindly, leaning slightly forward. "What's your question, young lady?" he asked, his voice warm and inviting. Lily swallowed hard, her knuckles white from gripping the Bible. She drew a deep breath, steadying herself. Then, in a voice that trembled but held steady, she asked, "What does God mean to you?" The hall fell silent. Every creak of a chair, every cough, every rustle of clothing ceased as if the air itself had stopped moving. The mayor, known for his quick wit and eloquent answers, froze. His usual charm softened into something raw and unguarded. "That's a big question," he finally said, his voice quieter than before. He glanced at Lily, then at the Bible in her hands, and something about his expression shifted. "When I was your age," he began, his tone contemplative, "I had questions like that too. I'd sit in church, staring at the stained glass windows, wondering if God was really listening to me." He paused, the room hanging on his every word. His hand rested lightly on the podium, fingers tapping rhythmically against the wood as though searching for the right words. "My father used to tell me that faith is like a tree," he continued. "It doesn't grow overnight. You water it, nurture it, and sometimes you don't see anything at all. But underground, the roots are spreading, getting stronger. At the time, I didn't understand. I thought it was just something he said to keep me from asking too many questions." A soft chuckle rippled through the audience, breaking the tension slightly. But Lily didn't laugh. Her eyes remained locked on him, waiting for the deeper answer she had sought. The mayor leaned forward, his voice softening. "As I grew older, life threw storms my way. I lost people I loved. I faced failures that made me question everything I believed in. And there were moments when I thought God had abandoned me." His voice caught briefly, and he cleared his throat. "But over time, I realized something. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that even when we can't see the whole picture, there's a purpose behind it. God, to me, is that purpose. He's the strength to keep going when the world feels heavy. He's the reminder that even when the tree looks bare, the roots are still alive." Lily's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. The room remained utterly silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone like a blanket. The mayor stepped away from the podium and knelt so he was at eye level with Lily. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," he said with a smile. "You know, Lily, sometimes the simplest questions are the most profound. Thank you for reminding me of what truly matters." The crowd erupted in applause, not the kind meant for politicians, but the kind reserved for moments that touch the heart. As Lily returned to her seat, she felt lighter, as though her question had planted a seed not just in the mayor, but in everyone in the room. When the evening ended and people began to file out, Lily turned to her mother. "Do you think Grandma would have been proud?" Her mother smiled, wiping away a tear. "She would have been over the moon, sweetheart." As they walked out into the crisp night air, the warmth of the moment lingered. Sometimes, a simple question doesn't just seek an answer. It plants a seed of faith, hope, and connection that grows in ways no one could have predicted. The night outside the community center was quiet, the air carrying the crispness of autumn. Families lingered in the parking lot, talking in hushed tones about what they had just experienced. The glow of the streetlights cast long shadows, but Lily's heart felt lighter than it had in days. As she and her mother walked toward their car, the mayor approached them, his tall figure silhouetted against the soft golden light from the hall. He carried his overcoat draped over one arm, his steps unhurried, as though he had something more to say. "Lily," he called softly, and she turned, clutching her green notebook. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady now. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, kneeling slightly so he could meet her gaze. "Not just for asking your question, but for reminding me, and everyone here tonight, what truly matters. Questions like yours aren't easy to ask. They take courage, and that's something many of us adults forget." Lily glanced at her mother, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. Then, looking back at the mayor, Lily said, "My grandma always told me that the most important questions are the ones that scare us the most. She said that's how we know they're worth asking." The mayor smiled, his expression softening into something almost paternal. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Lily said, her voice quieter now, "and she always said God listens, even when it feels like he's quiet." The mayor looked at the Bible in Lily's hands for a moment before speaking. She was right. And sometimes we need reminders like this, to stop and really listen, not just to each other, but to ourselves and to something greater. Lily's mother stepped forward, extending her hand. "Thank you for taking the time tonight," she said. "I think this will stay with her for a long time." "And with me," the mayor replied, shaking her hand firmly. He looked back at Lily. "You've inspired more people tonight than you know. Never stop asking the hard questions." "Okay." Lily nodded, her small face glowing with quiet pride. "I won't." The mayor straightened, slipping his overcoat on. "Take care of that Bible," he said with a nod toward the book in her hands. "It's more than just pages. It's part of your grandmother's legacy." "I will," Lily promised, her fingers brushing over the faded gold lettering. As the mayor walked back toward the building, Lily and her mother got into their car. The drive home was filled with comfortable silence, the kind where words weren't necessary. Lily stared out the window, the stars above seeming brighter than usual. "Mom," she said after a while, "do you think I'll ever be as brave as Grandma was?" Her mother smiled, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Sweetheart, you already are. Tonight, you showed everyone, including me, how brave you are. Grandma would be so proud of you." Lily nodded, her grip on the Bible loosening just slightly. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was beginning to understand the answers she had been searching for. Not all of them, but enough to know she wasn't alone. As they pulled into their driveway, the porch light flickered on, bathing their small house in a warm glow. Lily hopped out of the car, clutching the Bible close as she ran up the steps. She turned to her mother and said with a smile, "Grandma always said faith is like a light. Even when it flickers, it's still there." Her mother paused, the keys in her hand, and nodded. She did, and she was right. The two of them stood on the porch for a moment, the quiet of the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Inside, the world waited. But for now, the only thing that mattered was the shared understanding between a mother, a daughter, and the memory of a grandmother whose wisdom still lingered in their hearts. Sometimes, the smallest voices ask the most profound questions, and in their bravery, they remind us that faith, no matter how fragile it feels, has the power to light even the darkest corners. Lily pushed open the front door, her small hand gripping the worn brass knob. The familiar creak of the hinges greeted her, and the cozy scent of her home, lavender and a faint hint of her mother's baking, wrapped around her like an embrace. She stepped inside, her shoes tapping softly against the wooden floor. Her mother followed close behind, setting her keys on the entry table. "Why don't you go upstairs and get ready for bed, sweetheart? It's been a big night." Lily hesitated, her eyes glancing down at the Bible still pressed against her chest. Can I stay up for a little while? I want to write something. Her mother studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but not too late. Big thinkers like you need their rest too. Lily giggled softly and darted toward the small desk in the living room where her notebook and favorite pen waited. She climbed into the wooden chair, its legs wobbling slightly under her weight. Opening the notebook to a fresh page, she pressed the pen to the paper, pausing to gather her thoughts. She wrote slowly, her letters neat and deliberate. Faith is like a seed. Grandma told me that. You can't always see it growing, but it's working hard, even when it's hidden. Tonight, I think I saw my seed growing a little. Not just mine, but everyone's in the room, even the mayor's. She paused, chewing the end of her pen thoughtfully before adding, I don't know all the answers yet, but maybe I don't have to. Maybe faith is about trusting that God is there, even when we don't understand everything. Grandma would say that's what makes it beautiful, and she was right. Satisfied, Lily closed the notebook and looked at the Bible on her desk. Carefully, she opened it, her small fingers tracing over the worn pages. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the margins, each note a whisper from the past. She read a passage underlined in bold strokes. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Lily smiled. I get it, Grandma, she whispered. At least a little bit. Her mother appeared in the doorway, a soft smile on her face. Are you ready for bed now? Lily nodded, setting the Bible gently on her desk as though it were made of glass. She climbed the stairs to her room, her mother following close behind. As Lily nestled under her blankets, her mother leaned down and kissed her forehead. Good night, my brave girl, her mother said softly. Good night, Mom, Lily replied, her voice already heavy with sleep. And thanks for letting me ask. Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. Always, Lily, always. As the light clicked off and the room grew still, Lily clutched her notebook to her chest. The weight of the night's events pressed gently against her, not as a burden, but as a quiet reminder of what she had learned. She closed her eyes, the words of her grandmother echoing in her mind. Even the smallest seeds can grow into the tallest trees. Somewhere outside, a soft wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the promise of a new day. And in the small house on the quiet street, faith, though invisible, was growing strong roots. Downstairs, the smell of breakfast wafted through the house. Eggs, toast, and something sweet. Lily padded down the stairs, her feet tapping rhythmically on the wooden steps. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming softly as she flipped pancakes on the griddle. Morning, sweetheart, her mother said. Good, Lily replied. Her mother smiled knowingly. It was a special night. You asked a question that not only touched the mayor but the entire room. That doesn't happen every day. Lily reached for a glass of orange juice and sipped thoughtfully. Mom, do you think other people have questions like mine? Questions they're afraid to? Her mother paused, setting the spatula down. I think everyone has questions, Lily. Some big, some small. But not everyone has the courage to say them out loud. Lily nodded slowly, her mind turning over an idea. Do you think maybe I could help them? Her mother tilted her head, intrigued. Help them how? Lily hesitated, unsure how to put her thoughts into words. Like, maybe there's a way for people to share their questions, not just in front of a crowd, but somewhere safe, where no one feels scared. Her mother smiled warmly. That sounds like a wonderful idea. What do you have in mind? Lily shrugged, her fingers tracing the edge of her plate. Maybe a place where people can write their questions, like a box at church, or even here at home. I could read them and try to find answers, or just let them know it's okay to ask. Her mother's eyes sparkled with pride. I think your grandmother would love that idea, Lily. She always believed in the power of questions. Lily's excitement grew. She pushed her plate aside and grabbed her notebook from the counter. Flipping to a fresh page, she began sketching a simple design. A wooden box with a slot at the top and the words, Questions of the Heart, etched on the side. We could put this box in the church lobby, she said, showing her mother the drawing. And people could drop their questions in. Maybe the pastor could read them during service. Or I could ask him to help answer them. Her mother leaned over to look at the sketch. That's a beautiful idea. We could build the box together this weekend. Lily beamed. Do you think it'll help people? Her mother rested a hand on Lily's shoulder. I think it'll do more than that. I think it'll remind them that asking questions doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave. The day passed in a flurry of ideas. Lily wrote a list of materials for the box, imagining all the questions it might hold, big ones, small ones, questions that made people laugh, and questions that made them think deeply. She wondered if her grandmother's advice, tucked away in the margins of her Bible, might even help answer a few. By Saturday, Lily and her mother were in the garage, hammering and sanding pieces of wood into place. The smell of sawdust filled the air, and Lily's hands were covered in streaks of paint by the time they finished. The box stood proudly before them, its smooth surface painted in soft white, with "Questions of the Heart" written in looping gold letters across the front. At church the next morning, they placed the box in the lobby near the entrance. A small sign sat beside it, explaining its purpose. Have a question? Write it here. No question is too small or too big. Questions are seeds that help us grow. It didn't take long for people to notice. By the end of the service, several small slips of paper poked through the slot. Lily felt a surge of pride as she stood by the box, watching as people approached with shy smiles and folded notes in their hands. That evening, as Lily sat at her desk with her notebook open, she carefully unfolded each slip of paper, reading the questions aloud. Why does God let bad things happen? How can I have more faith when I feel lost? Does prayer really work? Each question filled her with a sense of purpose. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew she could try to find them. Through her pastor, her mother, her grandmother's Bible, or simply through listening. And so, Lily's simple idea grew into something much larger. The box became a symbol of hope for the community, a place where people could share their hearts without fear. It reminded them, week after week, that asking questions wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of faith in something greater. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on your own faith and share it with someone who might need it today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, challenge, and bring us closer together.